Have you ever noticed that sometimes prayers for financial provision are not merely wishes for more, but the stifled sighs of a soul teetering amidst endless uncertainties? Have you ever found yourself in a moment where a single utility bill could take your breath away? Not because you're lazy, not because you haven't tried, but because sometimes life spins in a cycle beyond your control. I used to think I was strong. I believed that as long as I worked hard, I would have enough. But then I realized that hard work doesn't always equate to prosperity. There were days when I toiled from dawn to midnight, my eyes burning from lack of sleep, yet my bank account remained as silent as a barren desert. I remember months when I had to choose between paying rent or buying medicine for my mother. I recall the feeling of standing at a checkout counter, counting every last coin, embarrassed and desperate, unsure which item to leave behind. One night in a small rented room, with faint light filtering through the window, I sat there, head in hands, tears quietly falling. I prayed, but this time it wasn't like before. I wasn't begging like a pauper anymore. I began to ask God, do you truly see me? Do you really love me as your word claims? If you promise blessings, why am I still in want? In that struggling night, I opened the Bible almost instinctively. Its worn pages, aged by years, led my hands to Psalm 112, a chapter I had never truly noticed before. But this time, the words seemed to glow in my mind. Blessed is the one who fears the Lord, who finds great delight in his commands. Wealth and riches are in their house, and their righteousness endures forever. I stopped. It was as if God was answering my question from moments before, as if he was whispering, I see you. I have never abandoned you, but have you truly lived according to my word? I realized that the promise of financial blessing isn't like winning a lottery ticket. It's the result of a life that fears God, delights in his ways. It's the fruit of an intimate relationship, not a transactional bargain. I was awakened from the delusion of merely asking without truly seeking God. The next morning, I woke up with something strange. Not money, not a job offer, but a calm, weightless peace in my soul. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the new day. I knew I was beginning a journey, not one to chase money, but to rediscover a right relationship with the one who provides all things. I told myself to try living by Psalm 112, not for 100 days, not for a year, just 7 days. 7 days of praying, meditating, and living as if that promise were true. Because I believe that if the Bible is true, even a mustard seed of faith could move mountains. I vividly remember that second morning. The sky was still gray, a thin mist cloaking the city that hadn't fully awakened. I sat at the small wooden table in the corner of my room, usually cluttered with books and work papers, but that day I placed only my Bible there. I opened Psalm 112 again, this time slowly, each word sinking into my being. Blessed is the one who fears the Lord, who finds great delight in his commands. I paused at the phrase, fears the Lord, a phrase I once misunderstood as dread, trembling before a stern, supreme being. But this time I let my heart settle and asked, what does it truly mean to fear God? I began to recall moments from my childhood, Sunday mornings when I held my mother's hand, walking down a dusty path to church. My mother never preached, but she lived like a living sermon, gentle, upright, frugal, and always praying each night before turning off the light. I realized that fearing God isn't about fearing punishment. It's about knowing he is greater than any circumstance, powerful enough to provide, and merciful enough to forgive. It's about living so that your heart never strays from him, even in the smallest decisions. I examined my life. There were times I chose small dishonesties in contracts to keep clients. Times I avoided declaring part of my income because everyone does it. I told myself I still loved God, still prayed regularly, but deep down, I knew I wasn't truly living in the fear of the Lord. That day I knelt, not out of fear of losing blessings, but because I saw my heart needed correction. I needed to be cleansed of old habits, old ways of thinking that had slowly eroded my true self. I prayed not for money, but to live again with an upright heart. Lord, make my heart soft before you. Help me fear you as I once feared disappointing my mother. Teach me to live honestly, not trading integrity for small gains. Restore me from the roots. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from an old friend. He didn't just check in, he offered me a chance to collaborate on a faith-based writing project. It wasn't a high-paying job, but it was work I'd always dreamed of. Writing, sharing about God, living true to myself. I didn't believe it was mere coincidence. I believed it was the first reward, not in money but in honor. A reminder that when you step into the light finds you. That night I lay in silence. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall. The sound of rain on the tin roof felt like the soothing touch of grace. I sensed something changing, not in the world out there, but within me. I began to believe that financial blessing doesn't start with numbers in a bank account, but with a heart that fears God. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, but the results still don't meet your expectations? Like you pray, read the Bible, try to live uprightly, yet doors remain closed and miracles seem distant. I've been there. On day 3, I stepped into that very territory where waiting becomes a part of faith. That morning, I sat by the window with a warm cup of ginger tea, looking out at the narrow alley below. The sounds of street vendors, motorbikes, and children calling out to each other were as familiar as ever. But inside me, there was a stillness. I opened the Bible again. This time, I didn't skim. I lingered on each verse, as if conversing with God Himself. The one who fears the Lord will have no fear of bad news. Their heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. I repeated, will have no fear of bad news. And I let out a soft chuckle, because I realized that for years my life had been driven by fear. Fear of not having enough money, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear that the promises in the Bible were for someone else, not me. I lived as if bad news lurked around every corner. My heart was more accustomed to the rhythm of anxiety than the calm of peace. That day I decided not to rush. I sat down and wrote. I wrote out my fears, every one of them, on paper. No hiding, no covering up. Then I placed my hand over the words and prayed, Lord, this is my heart, bare, weak, afraid. But today I choose to believe you are greater than my worries. I choose to trust you over my insecurities. Teach me to keep my heart steadfast, even on days with no answers. You know, no miracle followed that prayer immediately, but something quiet happened in my mind. The chaos subsided. I sat and planned my weekly budget. I called an old friend for job advice. I tidied my home as if preparing for something new. These small actions may sound ordinary, but they stemmed from a mind being healed. Change didn't begin with a deposit in my account. It began with how I saw the world, with how I walked, spoke, and chose trust over doubt. With turning off social media for an hour to sit in silence and write down what I was grateful for. And the more I gave thanks, the more I realized I wasn't as lacking as I thought. That evening, as I prepared for bed, I opened my phone and reread an old message from someone who had helped me in tough times. I had never properly thanked them, so I messaged them, not to ask for anything, but to say, thank you for not abandoning me back then. I still remember, and now I'm learning to live in grace again. That was day 3, and I began to understand that when you change within, the world around you starts to shift too. Have you noticed? Some days light doesn't come as a dazzling miracle, but as a faint thread, slipping through the cracks of a heart slowly opening after months of being shut tight. That was day 4 of my journey. I didn't wake up with elation, but I no longer woke with the constant weight of worry. A gentle stillness enveloped the room. The space was the same familiar room, sunlight filtering through the curtains as always. But something in my heart had shifted, as if a part of me was starting to believe. Blessings are coming, even if they're not yet clear. I returned to Psalm 112. This time I read verse 3. Wealth and riches are in their house, and their righteousness endures forever. I had read this verse many times, but today it rang differently. No longer a distant promise, but a reminder. A conviction from the one who created me. You were not born to live in lack forever. You were not made to dwell in debt and insecurity. I am Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides, and you are my child. I placed my hand on my heart. I didn't ask God for money to miraculously fall from the sky. Instead, I prayed for wisdom to manage, faithfulness to sow, and eyes to see the opportunities He had quietly placed along my path. You see, blessings don't always come as wealth and riches as we imagine. Sometimes it's a call from an old friend inviting you to a small project aligned with your passion. Sometimes it's a stranger reminding you of a skill you'd forgotten. Sometimes it's simply a shift in how you view the little money in your wallet, not as proof of lack, but as a seed of gratitude. That day I stepped out with a notebook in my bag. I went to the park, sat on a familiar stone bench, and began listing everything I had. My writing skills, work experience, the people I'd helped, those who had helped me. I didn't just list material assets, but also the intangible, perseverance, the ability to listen, the faith that lingered through long nights of prayer. And then, in the sunny midday, I laughed aloud, because I realized I wasn't empty-handed as I thought. I had capital, not just money, but the capital of life, of spirit, of love that I'd never factored into my equation of prosperity. That evening, I came home and cooked a simple, hearty meal. I played soft music, tidied my room as if preparing for a special guest. My heart no longer raced for results. I just knew I was on the right path, and that's when the light began to dawn. Not loudly, not dazzling, but enough to show me the darkness was retreating. Have you ever wondered, what can I give when I myself am lacking? I asked myself that question many times. I used to think I could only give when I had abundance. But on day 5, God taught me something profound, something that shook the foundations of my old faith. Generosity doesn't depend on your bank balance. It begins with a renewed heart. That morning I opened Psalm 112 again, and verse 9 shone brightly in my mind. They have freely scattered their gifts to the poor. Their righteousness endures forever. Their horn will be lifted high in honor. I read and reread those words. Freely scattered their gifts to the poor. They stopped me cold, because I knew I wasn't in a position to scatter wealth, at least not by worldly standards. But then I remembered an afternoon years ago when I was a student. I had exactly 50,000 Vietnamese dong in my wallet, enough to last until the weekend. That day, I met an elderly beggar at a familiar street corner. On impulse, I gave him all I had. I still remember the feeling, trembling yet peaceful. Strangely, that same afternoon, I got a call from an old part-time job, inviting me back. The pay covered the whole week. Back then, I saw the miracle but didn't grasp its deeper source. Now I understood. Generosity isn't a moral act. It's a key that unlocks the door to blessing. Not because giving forces God to give back, but because when I give, my heart becomes like His. And God cannot help but fill a heart that reflects Him. That day I decided to try something small. I cooked an extra portion of dinner, wrapped it carefully, and brought it to the man who collects recyclables in the alley below. We didn't talk much. He just looked at me with surprised, grateful eyes. And as I returned upstairs, I felt a lightness, as if a long-held knot had unraveled. I didn't just give food, I gave the belief that I still had something to share. I gave the image of a person being healed, learning to love again. And that day, God gave me so much in return, not in money, but in priceless things. A message came from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, inviting me to collaborate on a new project. An email from an old reader said my blog post from years ago had helped them through their darkest times. A call from my mother just to say she was proud I was becoming myself again. I realized that when I chose to live with an open, giving spirit, my life began to open too. Blocked streams started flowing again. Not because I tried to attract blessings, but because I lived as a child of the God who always gives. That evening, I wrote in my journal, "The rich are not those who possess much, but those who have learned to give, even when they have little." And I slept in that simple joy, no fanfare, no need for a dramatic miracle, just an ordinary day with generosity beginning to sprout. Have you ever felt as if something good is coming, though you can't name it, see its shape, or hold it yet? Just a faint sense, like the morning breeze on your skin, like the scent of rain from clouds not yet fallen. On day 6 of this journey, I began to feel it. I'm not saying everything was resolved. My bank account wasn't overflowing. Bills still sat on the table. The project I hoped for hadn't responded. But in my heart, there was an unprecedented peace, as if I knew with certainty that good news was on its way, just not yet at my door. That morning, opening the Bible, I lingered on verse 7 of Psalm 112. They will have no fear of bad news. Their heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. I read slowly, so slowly that each word seemed to seep into my blood. No fear of bad news, steadfast heart, trusting in the Lord. I asked myself, how can someone not fear bad news in this turbulent world? How can you keep your heart steadfast when the future is still unclear? How can you trust when disappointment has worn your faith thin? And then I remembered, you don't need to see the outcome to trust. You just need to know the one in whom you place your trust. And when you know who God is, faithful, unchanging, loving you unconditionally, you can choose to trust even when you see nothing. I look back at the past 6 days, from despair and doubt to flickering faith, then a dawning light, then generosity opening my heart. It wasn't fast, but each step carried meaning, as if I was being refined from within, not just to receive money, but to become someone worthy of lasting abundance. That afternoon, I sat at a small cafe near my home, not to work, but to sit quietly watching people. I wondered, how many of them are also waiting for good news? How many are trudging through dreary, gloomy days, like I was just days ago? Then I opened my phone and posted a simple line on social media. No frills, no need for likes. Dear friend, don't despair. Good news is coming. I don't know what it is, but I know God hasn't forgotten you. Within minutes, a friend messaged me. She said, I just read your post, and I cried. I needed to hear that today. I was stunned, because I realized when you believe good news is coming, sometimes you become the good news someone needs. And when you become a blessing to others, you open the door for blessings to enter your own life. That evening, I walked home slowly, as if there was no need to rush. My heart wasn't impatient anymore. I stopped asking, when will God provide? And began whispering, thank you, because I know you're working, even when I can't see it. In the quiet night, I recalled an old but timeless saying, faith isn't walking blindly in the dark. It's knowing God is holding your hand with every step. Day 6 ended. No miracles, no earth-shattering news. But in my soul, there was a very real certainty. Good news was coming. I didn't need to know when or how. I just needed to keep my heart steadfast and wait. And so, We've journeyed through 6 days of challenges and lessons. Each day, I learned something precious, from trusting God to living generously to finding joy in giving. Now, looking back, I ask myself, what will day 7 bring? Perhaps you're expecting me to tell of a miracle, unexpected money arriving, a grand opportunity appearing before me. But I don't want to end this story that way. Blessings to me don't always come as we imagine. Day 7 began with a quiet morning. I woke as usual, without haste, without the urge to do something grand. I sat down, opened the Bible as I had each day, and today I lingered on verse 10 of Psalm 112. The righteous will never be shaken. They will be remembered forever. This verse struck me like a powerful reminder. I didn't need to worry about life's ups and downs. Didn't need to fear change or hardship. If I walked God's path, if I lived righteously and justly, good things would come. Not because I deserve them, but because God is faithful and His promises never change. In that moment, I realized something vital. Blessings aren't just what I receive from the outside. They're the transformation within me. Over these days, I learned to see life not through the lens of lack, but through the lens of abundance. Abundance in faith, in peace, in precious relationships. I sat there in that quiet moment, feeling a deep peace in my heart. No noise, no rush. Just the gentle joy of understanding that blessings come not only from what I have, but from who I am, from the shift in how I see and live my life. And then, as if naturally, I received a call from a friend I hadn't heard from in ages. She shared news about a project I'd applied for long ago. I had been chosen to lead a major working group, not because I expected it, but because I was ready, not due to talent, but because my heart had been prepared, open to receive good things. After the call, my heart overflowed with gratitude, and I realized that throughout this journey, blessings didn't come just because I wanted them, but because I had changed how I saw life, myself, and those around me. That day, I stepped outside, walking unhurriedly, taking in the world with deep appreciation. I saw old friends chatting, waving and smiling at me. I felt these relationships were part of the blessings I received, not because they brought money or wealth, but because they showed me the true value of life: love, connection, sharing, and caring for one another. Back home, I opened my phone. Messages from friends and colleagues poured in. Some thanked me for encouragement over the past days. Others shared small joys in their lives. Some shared struggles they faced, and I realized I was part of their journey, just as they were part of mine. Day 7 ended in peace. I didn't need to do anything grand to prove I deserved blessings. I just needed to trust God, live righteously, and let Him lead. Blessings aren't just grand external things. They're the peace, the renewal within, the open heart, and gratitude. Today, I understand that blessings can come in the simplest forms: a call, a smile, a new opportunity, or simply the feeling of peace in my heart. And most importantly, I've learned to live with gratitude, with the expectation that everything will come in its time. Day 7, the final day of this journey, opened a new door, not just to financial provision, but to a fuller, richer life in God and in the love of others. And I believe that when we trust in His promises, blessings will always be with us.